This cinematic documentary presentation was crafted with the assistance of advanced artificial intelligence tools to respectfully recreate the staggering history of a maritime disaster that changed the course of global exploration and wealth. We invite you to join us on this somber journey with a positive and reflective spirit as we honor the hundreds of souls who perished alongside the greatest treasure ever lost to the sea. If you find this exploration of human tragedy and lost history meaningful, please support our channel by subscribing to help us continue bringing these forgotten stories back from the depths of the ocean floor. Imagine standing upon a deck burdened by literal tons of gold only to realize the immense weight of that stolen wealth is the very thing pulling you into the dark and hungry abyss today. In November 1511, the aging Portuguese frigate Flor de la Mar set sail from the conquered city of Malacca, carrying a cargo so massive it was destined to either enrich a kingdom or fail. Within the strained wooden hull lay the most staggering haul of treasure in naval history, including pure gold, precious stones, and the legendary Table of Solomon, all taken from the fallen Malaccan Sultanate's palace. The ship was old, decaying, and dangerously overladen, yet the Portuguese commanders refused to leave even a single coin behind, prioritizing the glitter of gold over the structural integrity of their leaking, fragile vessel. As the flower of the sea entered the treacherous Strait of Malacca, a violent and sudden storm tore through the sky, turning the shallow, muddy waters into a churning graveyard of timber and broken dreams. The vessel struck a hidden reef with a thunderous crack that echoed over the roaring wind, splitting the massive ship in two and spilling its billion-dollar cargo into the suffocating darkness of the sea. Hundreds of sailors and soldiers were cast into the freezing, turbulent water, while the heavy stern of the ship, laden with gold, slid backward into a deep underwater trench and vanished from the light. The sheer scale of the loss was unimaginable, as the richest ship in the world became a billion-dollar grave in a matter of minutes, swallowed by the shifting silt and the merciless and cold waves. For centuries, the location of this golden ghost remained a mystery, guarded by the deadliest shipping lanes and a thick sarcophagus of marine mud that refused to yield the secrets of the Portuguese crown. The Flor de la Mar was never meant to make this journey, as her timbers were rotted from years of service in the Indian Ocean, yet greed blinded the men who commanded her final voyage. Every deck was packed with heavy iron chests, and even the crew's sleeping quarters were filled with the spoils of war, leaving no room for the necessary repairs or the lifeboats that were needed. The storm was not the only cause of the disaster, for the ship was already sinking under the weight of her own pride before the first wave ever crashed against her vulnerable and leaking hull. As the wood groaned under the pressure of the gold, the sailors knew they were sailing on a floating coffin, yet they were bound by duty and the promise of a wealth they could never imagine. The transition from the glittering palaces of Malacca to the dark and muddy floor of the strait was a sudden and terrifying reminder of how quickly the fortunes of men can be reclaimed by nature. Today, the wreck sits as a silent warning against the pursuit of endless wealth, a golden anomaly buried beneath 30 feet of suffocating sediment that masks the true horror of that fateful and cold night. We begin our investigation by looking back at the records of the survivors, who spoke of a sea that turned black with mud and a sky that screamed as the ship was torn apart. They described the sound of the gold sliding across the deck like the roar of a landslide, a metallic thunder that drowned out the cries of the drowning and the prayers of the dying men. The tragedy of the Flor de la Mar is a story of a kingdom's greatest triumph turning into its most enduring nightmare, leaving a legacy of loss that still haunts the waters of the Malacca. As the ship broke, the treasure was not just lost, it was scattered across a deep underwater trench, creating a debris field of wealth that no human eye has seen in over 5 centuries. This was the end of the flower of the sea, a vessel that bloomed with the riches of the East only to be crushed by the very soil and sea she sought to conquer today. The loss of 400 lives was the true price paid for the gold, a staggering human cost that is often forgotten in the modern quest to find the billion-dollar treasure of the king. To understand the heart of this tragedy, we must look beyond the gold and focus on the individual lives that were anchored to their deaths by the weight of the Portuguese Empire's overwhelming greed. Among those caught in the gear of history was Afonso, a young and weary soldier who had survived 7 more years of brutal warfare in the service of a crown he barely even knew. He was a low-ranking man with no interest in the rubies or the emeralds, for his heart was fixed on a small cottage in Lisbon where a woman named Maria waited for his safe return. Afonso carried a small, dented silver locket in his pocket, a humble object containing a single lock of his wife's hair that he had kissed every night since he left the shores of home. He had survived the bloody siege of Malacca and the heat of the tropics, believing that this final voyage would be the one to carry him back to the arms of the woman he loved. On the night of the sinking, Afonso was off duty, clutching his locket as the ship began to tilt dangerously under the force of the waves and the shifting weight of the massive gold. He heard the wood splintering beneath his feet and knew that the ship was dying, but his only thought was to reach the upper deck and find a way to stay afloat in them. As he emerged from the hatch, he saw his fellow soldiers frantically trying to drag treasure chests toward the lifeboats, ignoring the fact that the small boats could never hold the weight of them. Afonso screamed for them to leave the gold behind, but the curse of greed had already taken hold, and the men refused to let go of the wealth they had fought so hard to. He pushed past the chaos, his eyes scanning the churning water for a piece of timber or a mast that might serve as a raft in the middle of the violent and stormy night. He found a discarded length of heavy rope and began to tie himself to a thick wooden beam, praying that his strength would hold against the pull of the currents and the cold. He whispered Maria's name into the wind, a desperate mantra of hope that was suddenly cut short as the ship gave a final, sickening lurch toward the dark and hungry depths of the ocean. A massive iron-bound chest, filled with the Sultan's golden statues, broke free from its moorings on the deck above and began to slide with terrifying speed toward the place where the young soldier. Before Afonso could react, the impossible weight of the treasure pinned him against the deck planks, crushing his legs and trapping him as the water began to rush over the rails of the. He reached for his pocket, feeling the cold silver of the locket one last time as the ship slid backward into the trench, dragging him and the gold into the suffocating and dark. The very wealth he had helped to conquer was now the anchor that ensured he would never see the sun rise over the hills of Lisbon or hold the woman he loved ever. Afonso's death was a silent one, muffled by the roar of the ocean and the weight of the silt that quickly began to settle over his broken body and his humble silver treasure. He became a permanent part of the Flor de la Mar's legacy, a soldier whose life was traded for a pile of gold that no one would ever be able to spend or enjoy. For 500 years, his remains have been held in the anaerobic embrace of the mud, a skeletal hand perhaps still resting near the locket that holds the only thread of his former. The story of Afonso is the story of the 400, whose personal dreams were sacrificed at the altar of an empire's hunger for the riches of a world they did not understand. We remember him not as a conqueror, but as a victim of a system that valued the weight of a chest over the breath of a man who only wanted to go home again. His wife, Maria, would spend the rest of her life walking the docks of Lisbon, searching the horizon for a ship that was already resting in a muddy grave half a world away. She never knew the fate of her husband or the silver locket she had given him, for the sea keeps its secrets better than any king or any historian could ever hope to today. The silence of the Strait of Malacca is the only answer to her prayers, a heavy and suffocating quiet that masks the tragedy of the soldier who was killed by the gold he protected. As we begin our modern exploration, we carry the memory of Afonso's locket with us, searching for the human heart amidst the ruins of the wealthiest and most tragic shipwreck in maritime history. The descent into his grave is a journey into the dark reality of greed, where the glitter of the past is buried under the crushing weight of the present and the shifting and deep. We must navigate the treacherous waters of the strait, where the visibility is zero and the current is a constant threat to the safety of our submersibles and the success of our mission. The seafloor here is a landscape of soft, gray mud that rises like a ghost at the slightest touch, making every movement a calculated risk in the search for the hidden and lost. We are diving into a world where history is felt rather than seen, where the pressure of the water and the thickness of the silt create a sense of being buried alive with them. Our submersibles are equipped with powerful lights and high-definition cameras, yet even they struggle to penetrate the veil of sediment that has protected the Flor de la Mar for 5 long and dark. We move through the shipping lanes, dodging the massive hulls of modern tankers that pass directly over the grave of the Portuguese frigate, unaware of the $1 billion resting just beneath their heavy. The contrast between the busy world above and the silent world below is a stark reminder of how quickly the glory of man can be forgotten by the passage of time and the. Our first task is to locate the primary anomaly detected by sonar, a massive shape buried deep within the silt that suggests the final resting place of the ship's broken and gold-filled stern. The data shows a metallic signature that is off the charts, a concentrated mass of gold and silver that has been hidden from the world since the year 1511 began. As we hover over the site, we feel the weight of the history beneath us, a heavy presence that seems to push back against our intrusion into this sacred and muddy and dark. The exploration of the Flor de la Mar is not a hunt for treasure, but a search for the truth of what happened on that stormy night in the middle of the Malacca Strait. We begin the slow process of clearing the silt, using gentle water jets to peel back the layers of time and reveal the wood that has been preserved in the oxygen-free environment below. The first signs of the ship are jagged pieces of oak, blackened by the centuries but still holding the shape of the hull that once carried the flower of the sea to her. We see the marks of the reef on the timber, deep gouges that tell the story of the impact and the sudden violence that tore the ship in two and ended her long. As the mud clears, we catch our first glimpse of the cargo hold, where the heavy iron chests are still stacked in neat rows, now encased in a thick crust of marine growth. The sight is both breathtaking and chilling, a golden cemetery where the wealth of an empire has been reclaimed by the sea and turned into a part of the underwater and dark landscape. We move our lights across the deck, looking for the remains of the crew and the personal items that will help us tell the story of the men who lived and died. The visibility is still a challenge, as the fine particles of silt create a ghostly haze that distorts our view and makes the wreck feel like a dream rather than a solid reality. We find a discarded helmet, its metal pitted and worn, resting near a pile of gold coins that have spilled out of a broken crate and onto the muddy and dark seafloor. The helmet is a reminder of the soldiers who guarded the treasure, men like Afonso who faced the storm in full armor, making it even harder for them to swim to safety today. Every step we take into the wreckage is a step into the past, a journey through the debris of a fallen world that has been frozen in time by the suffocating and gray. We discover a massive anchor, its flukes buried deep in the mud, which was likely dropped in a final, desperate attempt to hold the ship against the reef and the rising and. The chain leads away into the darkness, a rusted umbilical cord that connects the Flor de la Mar to the surface she will never reach again in the light of the sun. Our sonar reveals that the stern of the ship has slid even deeper into a trench, where the pressure is greater and the silt is even thicker than on the main reef. This is where the bulk of the treasure is believed to be hidden, a billion-dollar pile of gold resting in a place where no light has ever penetrated and no human. We prepare to descend into the trench, mindful of the dangers and the weight of the history we are about to uncover in the heart of the richest shipwreck in the whole. We transition from the clear upper waters into the dense green murk of the Malacca Strait where the visibility drops to near zero and the weight of the ocean feels heavy and today. Our submersibles descend slowly through the thick layers of suspended sediment, a vertical journey into a world of liquid shadows where the history of the Portuguese Empire is buried beneath the dark mud. The powerful beams of our underwater lights struggle to penetrate the swirling silt, creating a claustrophobic tunnel of light in the middle of a vast and prehistoric graveyard of wood and iron. We are searching for the metallic anomaly that sonar has identified as the broken hull of the Flor de la Mar, a massive target that has remained hidden from human sight for centuries. The seafloor here is not solid but a shifting sarcophagus of marine mud that can reach depths of 50 feet, swallowing everything that falls into its suffocating and oxygen-free and silent embrace. Every movement of our propellers kicks up a cloud of fine gray dust, a reminder of the thousands of years of erosion that have conspired to keep the billion-dollar treasure of Malacca. We navigate with extreme caution, mindful that the currents in the strait are notoriously unpredictable, capable of pushing our vessel into the jagged remains of a reef that once tore ships apart. The silence of the deep is absolute, broken only by the hum of our machinery as we push further into the trench where the stern of the Portuguese frigate is believed to rest. We catch our first glimpse of a solid structure emerging from the silt, the blackened oak of a hull timber that looks as if it were charred by fire rather than water today. The wood is remarkably preserved by the anaerobic conditions of the mud, holding the shape of the ship that was once the pride of the Portuguese fleet and the terror of the seas. We follow the line of the hull as it disappears into the sediment, realizing that the ship did not just sink but was literally crushed into the earth by the weight of gold. The contrast between the legends of the Golden Table and the dark claustrophobic reality of this muddy grave is a sobering reminder of the true cost of the Empire's overwhelming and blind greed. We find a section of the split hull where the wood has been torn away, revealing the interior of a cabin that was once filled with the laughter and the dreams of men. Now it is filled only with the slow-moving silt and the shadows of the past, a hollow space that echoes with the tragedy of the 400 souls who were lost here. Our cameras scan the debris field, looking for the specific signature of the iron-bound chests that were said to hold the most concentrated wealth in the history of the whole world and history. We discover a massive anchor fluke protruding from the mud like a giant rusted claw, a symbol of the desperate and failed attempt to hold the ship against the fury of storm. The anchor is a monument to the futility of human technology when faced with the raw power of a tropical storm and the unforgiving rocks of a hidden and dangerous coral reef. As we move toward the stern, the metallic signature on our sensors begins to spike, indicating a massive concentration of heavy metals that can only be the legendary and rich gold cargo. The excitement of the discovery is tempered by the knowledge that we are walking through a graveyard, a place where the glitter of the past is forever joined to the bones today. We begin to use the gentle water jets to peel back the layers of mud, a delicate operation that requires patience and precision to avoid damaging the fragile and ancient remains below. The first objects to emerge are not gold but the simple belongings of the crew, a rusted knife and a ceramic plate that tell of the daily life aboard the Flor de Marche. These humble items are the first clues to the human story that has been buried here, a narrative of survival and duty that was suddenly interrupted by the violence of the sinking. We find a shattered glass bottle that once held the fine wines of Portugal, its surface now etched by the salt and the sand of the Malacca Strait over many long centuries. The debris field is vast, stretching across the underwater trench in a chaotic pattern that reflects the violence of the ship's disintegration as it struck the reef in the middle of night. We are moving into the heart of the Golden Ghost, a place where the dreams of a king and the lives of his subjects were weighed against the power of the sea. Our lights catch a sudden glint of deep crimson in the mud, a flash of color that stands out against the gray and green monotony of the seafloor like a drop of blood. We clear the silt to reveal a fist-sized ruby, its facets still sharp and clear, a gem that was once destined for the royal treasury of Lisbon but was reclaimed by the ocean. The ruby is encrusted with marine growth, a living layer of coral that has slowly built a fortress around the precious stone over the course of 500 long and weary centuries. Nearby we discover a single gold coin, its surface polished by the movement of the sand until it shines with a brilliance that seems out of place in this dark and muddy. This coin is just one of millions that are believed to be buried here, a fraction of the billion-dollar wealth that remains locked within the thick sarcophagus of the marine and gray silt. We move our submersible toward a large rectangular anomaly that sonar has identified as an iron-bound chest, its lid still tightly sealed after 5 centuries of submersion in the deep and dark. The chest is half buried in the silt, its heavy metal straps rusted but still holding firm, protecting the treasures of the Malaccan Sultanate from the prying eyes of the modern world today. We imagine the riches that lie inside, the intricate gold jewelry and the precious stones that were gathered from across the east only to be cast into the muddy and silent depths. The weight of the chest is what made it a weapon of destruction on that stormy night, a massive and unyielding force that crushed anything in its path as the ship went down. We find a section of the stern where the decorative carvings of the Portuguese crown are still visible on the wood, a haunting reminder of the imperial pride that fueled this final voyage. The carvings are worn by the current but still recognizable, a symbol of a kingdom that sought to conquer the world only to lose its greatest prize to the hungry and cold. Our cameras capture the skeletal remains of a structural beam that once supported the great cabin, its grain still visible beneath the layer of sediment that has protected it from decay today. In the corner of what was once the main hold we find a pile of emeralds that have spilled out of a rotted leather bag looking like green stars in the silt. Each stone is a fragment of the history of Malacca, a piece of a culture that was dismantled and packed away to satisfy the hunger of a distant and powerful Portuguese empire. The sheer concentration of wealth in this one small area is staggering, yet the beauty of the jewels is overshadowed by the oppressive and dark atmosphere of the underwater and dark grave. We discover a silver-plated trumpet, its bell filled with mud, which once signaled the arrival of the Portuguese fleet in foreign ports with a sound of triumph and of military power today. Now the trumpet is silent, a relic of a vanished era that serves only as a home for the small crabs and the eels that haunt the ruins of the Flor Marche. Every object we uncover is encrusted with the history of the sea, a physical record of the passage of time and the slow decay of the things that men value most. We see a piece of heavy iron chain, its links fused together by rust, which once held a piece of the cargo in place before the storm turned everything into a grave. The evidence of the ship's final moments is written in the way the artifacts are scattered, a story of sudden violence and a frantic struggle to save the gold and lives. We find a small bronze bell, its surface pitted by the salt, which once rang the hours of the watch for the sailors who never reached the safety of the harbor. The bell's voice has been replaced by the rhythmic sound of the tides, a constant and moving pulse that keeps time for the dead who rest in the muddy and silent deep. As we move deeper into the debris, we find the remains of a personal trunk, its wooden slats broken to reveal a collection of rotted clothing and a rusted and broken. These are the intimate remains of a life interrupted, a reminder that the Flor de la Mar was more than just a treasure ship, it was a home for the many souls. We take a moment to reflect on the contrast between the glittering rubies and the humble personal effects that are buried side by side in the dark and silent and deep. We move our lights toward the area where the hull split in two and they're partially buried in the silt. We see the first clear evidence of the human and tragic loss. A skeletal hand is found protruding from the mud near a massive treasure chest, its fingers still curled in a final instinctive grip on the very wood that would be death. The bones are white and fragile against the dark sediment, a haunting image of the men who chose to stay with the gold until the sea finally took their last breath. Just inches from the hand we discover a small dented silver locket, its surface covered in a thin layer of oxidation, but its shape still clearly recognizable as a token of love. This is Afonso's locket, the humble piece of home that he carried across thousands of miles of ocean, now resting in the middle of a billion-dollar pile of stolen and heavy. We use a soft brush to clear the silt from the silver, and for the first time in 500 years the light of the sun reaches the surface of this silver. The locket is wedged tightly between the deck planks and the corner of the heavy iron chest, confirming the survivor accounts of the soldier who was pinned to his watery end. We see the splintered wood where the chest struck him, a physical record of the moment when his dreams of return were crushed by the weight of the Portuguese Empire's overwhelming greed. Inside the locket we imagine the lock of hair that once represented a promise of a future together, now protected by the anaerobic mud of the seafloor in the Malacca Strait. This small object holds more emotional power than all the gold of Malacca combined, for it is the only thing that belonged truly to him in a world of war. We find a rusted dagger nearby, its hilt still gripped by the skeletal fingers, a sign of the desperate struggle he waged against the rising water and the crushing and heavy. The tragedy of Afonso is the tragedy of every man who was sacrificed for the wealth of a crown, a human life weighed and found less valuable than a ruby today. His remains are a permanent part of the wreck, a sentinel guarding the treasure that he never wanted and that ultimately became his anchor and his final and silent and resting place. We see a religious medal of Saint Christopher tangled in the debris near his body, a silent plea for protection that was answered only by the peace of the deep ocean. The proximity of his personal items to the greatest wealth of the ship is a cruel irony that defines the entire disaster of the Flor de la Mar and crew. We document the sight with a sense of profound reverence, knowing that we are looking at the final moments of a man who died for a king he never saw today. Every piece of evidence we find sharpens the pain of the story, making the abstract history of the 16th century feel intimate and real in the middle of the muddy deep. The silt around him is filled with the smaller artifacts of his life, a bone button and a leather pouch that speak of the simple needs of a soldier on voyage. These things have survived while the empires that produced them have faded into the dust of time, leaving only the bones and the silver and the gold in the dark. We move our submersible further down the trench, following the trail of debris that Afonso's final moments helped to mark for the explorers of the future and the modern world. The scale of the tragedy is overwhelming as we realize that hundreds of other men are likely buried just like him beneath the thick and suffocating and dark and green water. Their stories are lost to time, but their presence is felt in every piece of wood and every glint of gold that we uncover in the heart of the wreck. We prepare to offer a prayer for those who rest here, recognizing that the Flor de la Mar is not just a shipwreck but a cathedral of loss and rest. The silver locket remains our focus, a small light in the darkness that reminds us that love is the only treasure that can survive the crushing weight of the gold. We leave the site of Afonso's death, carrying his story back to the world above the waves, ensuring that his sacrifice and his love are finally remembered and honored today. We hover in the heavy silence of the Malacca Strait, offering a quiet and humble prayer for Afonso and the 400 souls lost within this shifting and dark and golden tomb today. May God have seen their profound fear on that terrifying November night when the sky turned black and the ocean rose up to claim the lives that survived the wars of conquest. We pray that mercy reached down into the churning and muddy waters of Sumatra, providing a sense of divine peace to the men who were anchored to their deaths by the gold. Let us remember the waiting hearts in Lisbon, like Maria, who never received a final farewell but continued to pray for the return of a husband who was already resting in the silt. We trust that the Lord knows the location of every lost soul, even those buried beneath 40 feet of suffocating marine mud where no human hand can ever reach to find them. May the silver locket and the lock of hair inside be a symbol of the eternal love that transcends the crushing weight of the treasure and the passage of 5 long centuries. We ask for comfort for the families of the fallen, whose names have been erased by time but whose sacrifices are still felt in the quiet currents of this ancient shipping lane. May this wreck serve as a somber reminder to pray for those who travel the seas, facing the unpredictable forces of nature in search of a better life for their loved ones. Let the spirit of Afonso find rest in the knowledge that his story is finally being told with the dignity and the respect that was denied to him on that stormy night. We pray that the light of grace shines through the emerald murk, illuminating the darkness of the trench and bringing a sense of holy rest to the shattered remains of the ship. May the souls of the Flor de la Mar be gathered into the arms of the Creator, far away from the greed of kings and the violent storms that claimed their earthly lives. We ask for a blessing upon the explorers and the divers who seek to uncover the truth, that they may do so with a spirit of reverence for the human tragedy. Let the quiet of the seafloor be a cathedral of memory, where the gold is seen not as a prize to be won but as the weight that anchored men to their May the peace that passes all understanding settle over the broken hull, transforming the site of a disaster into a place of quiet and eternal and sacred reflection for our modern world. We find comfort in the belief that the love Afonso carried in his locket is more enduring than the rubies and the emeralds that lie scattered in the mud around his body. May the mercy of the deep waters wash away the stains of war and greed, leaving behind only the pure memory of the lives that were sacrificed for the Portuguese crown. And we offer this prayer for the forgotten, the low-ranking soldiers and the anonymous sailors whose bones are the foundation of the wealthiest and most tragic shipwreck in the entire history of the. Let the grace of God be the final anchor for the Flor de la Mar, holding her steady in the current of time until the day when all secrets are revealed today. We pray that the families who never knew the fate of their sailors have finally found peace in the afterlife, reunited with the ones they waited for on the docks of home. May the story of the silver locket inspire us to value the simple treasures of the heart above the material wealth that can be lost in a single night of violent storm. We ask for a moment of silence in our hearts for the 400, as our lights flicker over the remains of the ship that became their final and eternal home today. May the spirit of compassion guide our modern search for the Flor de la Mar, ensuring that we honor the humanity of the victims above the value of the lost gold. And let the light of the divine reach into the silt sarcophagus, warming the cold bones of the soldiers and sailors who have waited in the darkness for over 500 long years. We trust that the cries for help that were drowned out by the storm were heard in the heavens, and that no soul was ever truly alone in their final moments. May the memorial of the Flower of the Sea be a testament to the endurance of the human spirit and the importance of remembering those who were taken by the deep abyss. We conclude our prayer with a hope for the preservation of this sacred site, that it may remain a monument to the dead rather than a target for modern-day treasure hunters. And let the peace of the deep be the final word spoken over the wreck, a benediction that covers the gold and the bones and the silver locket in a protective shroud. May the mercy of the Father be a constant presence in the Malacca Strait, guarding the resting place of the Flor de la Mar and the souls she took with her. We carry this spirit of prayer back to the surface, changed by the encounter with the tragedy of Afonso and the weight of the gold that pulled him to his end. Let the memory of the 400 be a light in our own lives, reminding us to hold on to the things that truly matter before the storms of life arrive to us. The Flor de la Mar remains the wealthiest shipwreck in the world, yet its true cost is measured in the hollow eyes of the skeletal remains buried deep within the thick marine mud. The ship is a monument to the curse of greed, a vessel that was too old and too heavy to survive the ambition of the men who refused to leave any gold. We look at the broken hull through the lens of history, seeing a ghost ship that was anchored to its death by the very treasure it was built to protect and carry. The silt sarcophagus has done its work well, hiding the billion-dollar grave beneath layers of suffocating sediment that mask the horror of the night when the ship finally split into two pieces. We are left with the image of the golden debris field, a metallic anomaly on a sonar screen that represents the shattered dreams of a kingdom and its many fallen Portuguese soldiers. The mystery of the Flor de la Mar is not where it lies, but how such a massive tragedy could be so completely swallowed by the shallow and muddy and dark waters today. We reflect on the evidence of Afonso's locket, a small and humble object that survived the pressure of the mud and the weight of the gold to tell his human story. His sacrifice is a reminder that the dead deserve more than just a search for their gold. They deserve our memory, our prayers, and our respect for their final and desperate struggle. The wreck of the Flower of the Sea is a cultural tomb that belongs to the history of the world, a place where the wealth of empires meets the cold reality. We question whether the treasure should ever be raised, or if the gold and the bones should be left together in the silence of the Malacca Strait for all of eternity. The sea has a way of balancing the accounts of men, taking back the riches that were gained through blood and war and burying them in the deep and silent and dark. Afonso's wife, Maria, never knew that her lock of hair was guarding $1 billion in gold, a silent sentinel in the heart of the richest shipwreck in all of human history. The tragedy of the Flor de la Mar is a story of a journey that never finished, a mission that was doomed by the very cargo it sought to carry across the. We see the wreck as a warning from the past, a lesson in the dangers of prioritizing material wealth over the safety and the lives of the people who serve empires. The shifting silt of Sumatra will continue to move, slowly erasing the outlines of the ship until only the legend remains to haunt the dreams of the modern-day treasure hunters and explorers. The skeletal hands still clutching the iron chests are a visual record of the desperation that filled the deck as the ship began its final and terrifying descent into the muddy abyss. We honor the 400 souls by acknowledging their suffering and by ensuring that the story of their lost and golden grave is never forgotten by the generations that follow their memory. The Flor de la Mar is a golden ghost that sails the currents of our imagination, a reminder of the fragility of human ambition and the power of the deep ocean waters. We look at the sonar images one last time, seeing the broken shape of the hull as a testament to the violent end of the richest ship in the whole world. The silver locket is a small but powerful light in the darkness, a connection to the love that existed before the storm and the gold and the sudden and terrifying end. We leave the site with a heavy heart, knowing that the secrets of the Malacca Strait are well guarded by the mud and the currents and the memories of the lost four. The treasure will likely remain buried forever, a billion-dollar ghost that serves as a monument to the men who were anchored to their deaths by the weight of their own stolen gold. We remember Afonso not as a soldier of conquest, but as a man who loved and lost, his life caught in the gears of history and the seas cold and dark. The Flor de la Mar is a bridge between the 16th century and our own, a story of wealth and woe that resonates across the centuries of human exploration and loss today. We find dignity in the silence of the wreck, a quiet respect for the dead that is more valuable than any ruby or emerald found in the deep and dark end. The memorial of the flower of the sea is written in the silt and the salt, a narrative of a kingdom's pride and the individual heartbreaks that followed the sudden sinking. We trust that the story of the silver locket will linger in the minds of our viewers, a reminder of the human cost of the treasures we seek to find today. The ocean has claimed the gold, but it can never claim the memory of the love that Afonso carried in his pocket on that final and tragic night of the storm. We close this chapter of maritime history with a salute to the fallen, the 400 souls who rest in the golden grave of the Malacca Strait for all of time. The Flor de la Mar will forever be the richest shipwreck, not because of the gold, but because of the stories of the people who sailed her into the dark night. We reflect on the curse of greed and how it continues to shape the world, a cycle of pursuit and loss that is mirrored in the ruins of the Portuguese. The silt around the wreck is a sacred shroud, a layer of protection that keeps the tragedy of the past away from the noise of the busy world above the waves. We see the ghost of the ship in the swirling currents, a reminder of the power of the sea to humble the greatest empires and the most ambitious of all men. The silver locket remains a focal point of our journey, a symbol of the enduring power of the human heart to find meaning in the middle of a billion-dollar disaster. We leave the billion-dollar grave to the silence of the abyss, a place where the gold is worthless and the prayers of the living are the only true currency left. The legacy of the Flor de la Mar is one of sorrow and splendor, a dual nature that defines the history of the sea and the men who dare to cross. We remember the names that were lost to the storm, giving them a voice through our narration and a place in the memory of those who listen to their story today. The wreck is a time capsule of the 16th century, a snapshot of a world caught between the medieval past and the age of global exploration and sudden and violent. We honor the sacrifice of Afonso, a soldier who wanted only to return to his wife, his story a poignant contrast to the grand ambitions of the Portuguese Empire's leaders. The Flor de la Mar is a silent teacher, showing us the true weight of our choices and the importance of leaving a legacy of love rather than a legacy of. We watch as the mud settles back over the timbers, hiding the glint of the rubies once more in the protective and dark and deep embrace of the Sumatran seafloor. The billion-dollar treasure is a burden that the ship still carries, a heavy load that keeps her resting in the trench of the Malacca Strait for all of time today. We find a sense of peace in the knowledge that the dead are no longer suffering, their final struggle over and their rest secured in the deep and quiet ocean. The story of the golden ghost of Malacca is finished, but its echo will continue to ring in the hearts of those who respect the sea's many secrets and stories. The Flor de la Mar will remain a golden ghost, a billion-dollar grave that reminds us that the greatest treasures of humanity are not made of gold but of love.